Marcus Thompson stood at the entrance of Oakwood High School, taking a deep breath as he adjusted his tie. The building loomed before him, a brick structure that had witnessed generations of students pass through its halls. Today was his first day as a history teacher, a moment he had long dreamed of. His heart fluttered with a mix of excitement and anxiety, and he couldn't shake off the nagging feeling that he had something to prove, not just to himself, but to the entire community. He stepped inside, the scent of polished wood and fresh paint filling the air. The sounds of lockers slamming and students chatting echoed through the corridors. As he walked to his classroom, he passed groups of teenagers who barely glanced in his direction. He wondered if they would be receptive to his lessons or if they would dismiss him like others had before. Entering classroom 204, Marcus was greeted by a sea of disinterested eyes. The students slouched in their chairs, some scrolling on their phones, others whispering among themselves. He cleared his throat, trying to capture their attention. "Good morning, everyone. I'm Mr. Thompson, and I'll be your history teacher this year." A few students mumbled a half-hearted response, while others continued to chat. Marcus felt a twinge of disappointment, but he pressed on. "I believe history is not just about dates and events. It's about understanding our world and the people in it. I hope to make this class engaging and relevant to your lives." "Sure, whatever," a girl in the back muttered, rolling her eyes. Marcus took a deep breath, reminding himself that this was only the beginning. "How about we start with a discussion? What do you think is the most significant event in history?" A boy with a baseball cap shrugged. "I don't know, man. It's all boring." He could feel the weight of their indifference pressing down on him. He had envisioned a classroom filled with curiosity and enthusiasm, not apathy. "Well, let's try something different," he suggested, trying to mask his frustration. "What if we discuss how historical events have shaped our lives today? For example, how do you think the civil rights movement affects us now?" This time, a flicker of interest sparked in a few pairs of eyes, but the overall mood remained tepid. As the bell rang, signaling the end of the period, Marcus sighed. He was determined to break through the barriers, but it wouldn't be easy. Later that week, the school held a parent-teacher meeting. Marcus sat at a small table in the gymnasium, surrounded by other teachers. The atmosphere was tense as parents filed in, their expressions a mix of curiosity and skepticism. He straightened his papers, hoping to make a positive impression. As the meeting commenced, several parents approached him, their voices laced with doubt. "Mr. Thompson, I have to ask," a woman began, crossing her arms defensively. "What makes you qualified to teach my child?" Marcus felt a wave of unease wash over him. "I have a degree in history and several years of teaching experience," he replied, keeping his tone steady. "I'm passionate about empowering students to see the relevance of history in their own lives." "But do you understand our community?" Another parent interjected. "Can you relate to our children's experiences?" Marcus swallowed hard. He could sense the underlying prejudices in their questions, and the hostility made his heart race. "I believe that history is a universal narrative. Everyone has a story to tell, and I want to help your children find theirs," he responded, hoping to bridge the gap. The parents exchanged glances, their skepticism palpable. "We just want what's best for our kids," one man stated, his tone condescending. "We're not sure you can provide that." As the meeting continued, Marcus felt increasingly isolated. The hostility from the parents struck him like a blow, leaving him feeling unwelcome in the very place he had hoped to make a difference. After the last parent left, he leaned against the table, feeling the weight of their doubts settle heavily on his shoulders. Later that evening, Marcus found solace in the teacher's lounge, where he stumbled upon Ms. Johnson, a veteran educator known for her nurturing spirit. She noticed his downcast expression and approached him. "Hey, Marcus, how did it go?" "Not well," he admitted, running a hand through his hair. The parents were skeptical. They questioned my credentials and my ability to teach their kids. "I feel like I'm fighting an uphill battle." Ms. Johnson placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You're not alone. Change takes time, and those parents just need to see the impact you can have. Focus on your students. Prove them wrong through your teaching." Her words resonated with him, igniting a flicker of hope. "You really think so?" "Absolutely," she replied, her eyes sparkling with encouragement. "You have the passion and the talent. Don't let their doubts dim your light. Your students need you to believe in them and in yourself." Marcus nodded, feeling a renewed sense of determination. He would not let the prejudice of others define him or his potential. He would find a way to uplift his students and, in doing so, perhaps change the hearts of the community that had cast shadows on his path. Marcus Thompson stood at the front of his classroom, a determined glint in his eyes as he stared at the whiteboard filled with colorful diagrams and modern references. The previous weeks had been challenging, yet he refused to succumb to despair. Instead, he had channeled his frustration into crafting a vibrant, engaging curriculum that connected historical events to current social issues, aiming to ignite a spark of interest among his students. He had traded the conventional lectures for discussions about civil rights movements and contemporary social justice issues, believing that the relevance would resonate with the young minds before him. As the bell rang, signaling the end of lunch, the students shuffled into the room, their chatter filling the air. Marcus noticed a few of them rolling their eyes, but he was undeterred. "All right, everyone settle down," he called out, his voice firm but encouraging. "Today, we're going to delve into how history shapes our present. Who can tell me about a recent event that reminds you of something we studied?" A hand shot up in the back. It was Jasmine, a quiet girl who had initially been skeptical of his teaching. "The protests for racial equality," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Like after George Floyd?" "Exactly." Marcus beamed, his heart swelling with pride. "And how do those protests connect to the civil rights movement of the 1960s? The room buzzed with conversation, students leaning forward, eager to share their thoughts. For the first time, Marcus felt a genuine engagement. He was not just teaching history, he was connecting it to their lives. Weeks passed, and this newfound enthusiasm transformed the classroom dynamic. Marcus watched as students who once sat in silence began to debate, question, and challenge one another. During group projects, laughter filled the room, and the sound of pencils scratching on paper became a symphony of learning. He felt invigorated by their progress, ready to face the next challenge, the lingering skepticism from certain parents. It was during the annual school fair that the tension reached its peak. Parents mingled under the bright banners, discussing everything from bake sales to school performances. Marcus had set up a booth showcasing his students' projects, filled with colorful posters and interactive displays. As he adjusted the positioning of a particularly eye-catching piece, he noticed a group of parents approaching, including Mrs. Collins, a vocal critic of his methods. "Marcus," she began, her tone sharp, "I see you're still trying to make history relevant. But some of us believe that teaching our children about modern issues is just a way to push a certain agenda." Marcus took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words. "Mrs. Collins," he replied evenly, "history is not just about dates and events. It's about understanding the world we live in. If we ignore the connections to today, we're doing a disservice to our children." "Is that so?" she challenged, crossing her arms. "And what do you think they'll gain from your modern issues lessons?" "Critical thinking, empathy, and the ability to assess their surroundings," he answered, his voice steady. "These skills are crucial for their future. We can't teach history in a vacuum. It's about learning from the past to create a better tomorrow." The confrontation drew the attention of nearby parents, igniting murmurs of curiosity. Marcus felt the eyes of the crowd on him, his pulse quickening. "Many of my students have found their voices through this curriculum," he continued, looking around to meet the gaze of those who had been listening. "I've seen them grow and engage with their world in ways I never imagined possible." Mrs. Collins scoffed. "And what about traditional learning methods? You're throwing them out the window." "Not at all," Marcus replied, his passion flaring. "I'm blending traditional methods with modern relevance. History is alive. It's not a dusty book on a shelf. It's in the streets, in the news, and in their everyday lives." The debate was escalating, voices rising as other parents interjected. "I think he makes a good point," one father said, nodding towards Marcus. "If we want our kids to be informed citizens, we should prepare them for the world they're inheriting." Marcus felt a rush of support, but Mrs. Collins wasn't backing down. "So, you're all okay with this? Allowing our kids to be influenced by a teacher who seems more like a political activist than an educator?" The room grew tense, the air thick with unresolved opinions. "What I am," Marcus said, his voice calm, "is a teacher who believes in the potential of every student. I want them to think critically, challenge the status quo, and become the leaders of tomorrow." As the crowd murmured, some nodding in agreement while others remained skeptical, Marcus stood tall, ready to face whatever came next. He realized that the battle for their hearts and minds was just beginning, but he was resolute. In this small town, he would continue to fight for his students and for the chance to reshape the narrative around education, one lesson at a time. Marcus stood at the front of his classroom, surveying the vibrant energy that filled the air. The walls were adorned with colorful posters of influential figures in history, and the desks were scattered with art supplies, books, and various project materials. Today marked the beginning of a new chapter for his students, a collaborative history project designed to inspire creativity, teamwork, and a deeper understanding of their heritage. "All right, everyone," Marcus called out, his heart racing with anticipation. "Today, we're starting our group projects. Each team will choose a significant historical event or figure and present it in a way that reflects your creativity. You can create a skit, a video, or even an art piece. The goal is to work together and have fun while learning." The students exchanged glances, a mix of excitement and uncertainty washing over them. A hand shot up from the back of the room. It was Jamal, a quiet yet insightful student who had slowly come out of his shell under Marcus's guidance. "Mr. Thompson, can we choose any event? Even ones that aren't in the textbook?" "Absolutely," Marcus replied, grinning. "The more unique, the better. I want to hear your voices and see your perspectives. This is your chance to explore history in a way that speaks to you." As the students began to form groups, the room buzzed with chatter. Laughter and ideas flowed freely, and for the first time, Marcus felt a true sense of camaraderie among his students. He moved around the room, listening in on conversations, offering encouragement and suggestions. "Remember," he said to a group discussing the civil rights movement, "your project can highlight not just what happened, but why it matters today. Connect it to your own experiences." Hours passed as the students poured their hearts into their work. Marcus felt a swell of pride watching them collaborate, their initial apathy replaced by enthusiasm. When the bell rang, signaling the end of the school day, he called out, "Don't forget to bring your materials tomorrow. I can't wait to see what you all create." The following week, the classroom transformed into a gallery of impressive projects. One group presented a powerful skit on the life of Harriet Tubman, skillfully weaving in contemporary themes of freedom and justice. Another team unveiled a colorful mural depicting the struggles and triumphs of the LGBTQ+ rights movement, accompanied by a moving narrative that resonated with their peers. As Marcus walked among the groups, he felt a sense of accomplishment wash over him. "I'm so proud of each and every one of you," he said, his voice filled with genuine admiration. "You've worked hard, and it shows. These projects are not just assignments. They are expressions of who you are." Just as the students began to bask in their success, the principal, Mrs. Carter, entered the room, her eyes widening in surprise at the vibrant atmosphere. "Wow, Marcus, this is incredible," she exclaimed, taking in the creativity that surrounded her. "I'd love to showcase these projects at the next school board meeting. The community needs to see the amazing work you and your students are doing." "Thank you, Mrs. Carter," Marcus replied, his heart racing with excitement. "I think it's a great way to show the parents how engaged the students have become. This could be a turning point for us." But later that evening, as Marcus returned home, he noticed a small envelope slipped under his door. Confused, he bent down to pick it up, and as he opened it, his heart sank. Inside were racial slurs, hateful words that struck him like a physical blow. The anonymity of the letter felt like a cowardly attack, and for a moment, doubt crept into his mind. "What do they want?" he whispered to himself, the weight of the words heavy on his chest. "Why can't they see the good I'm trying to do?" Tears pricked his eyes, but he quickly brushed them away, refusing to give in to despair. He took a deep breath and clenched the letter in his fist. This wasn't just about him. It was about his students, about proving their worth to a community that had been blind to their potential. As he lay in bed that night, Marcus resolved to channel his hurt into strength. He would not let ignorance and prejudice derail the progress he had made with his students. He would fight back not just for himself, but for every child who deserved to be seen and heard. Tomorrow, he would share his experience with Ms. Johnson and seek her advice on how to confront this latest challenge. After all, his journey was only beginning, and he was determined to see it through. As the afternoon sun began its descent, casting a warm glow over the Oakwood High School auditorium, Marcus Thompson stood at the front of the room, his heart racing with a mix of apprehension and excitement. He had invited the parents to witness the culmination of months of hard work from his students, an event meant to showcase not only their projects but also their growth. The auditorium buzzed with a mix of chatter and skepticism, and Marcus could feel the tension in the air. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming tonight," Marcus began, his voice steady despite the fluttering in his stomach. "Today, you will see the incredible work your children have done. They've poured their hearts into these projects, and I believe you'll be amazed at what they've accomplished." As he introduced the first group of students, he noticed a few parents whispering among themselves, their expressions a mix of skepticism and disbelief. Marcus felt a pang of disappointment, but pushed it aside. This was their moment, and he had faith in his students. The first group, a trio of girls, presented a project titled The Voices of the Past. They narrated the stories of lesser-known historical figures, each story woven with lessons of resilience and courage. As they spoke, the room fell silent, captivated by their passion and insight. One of the girls, Amina, concluded, "History is not just about dates. It's about people and their struggles. We can learn from them to make our own lives better." The applause was genuine, and Marcus beamed with pride. But he could still feel the weight of judgment from some parents seated in the back. He caught sight of Mrs. Stevens, arms crossed and lips pursed, her expression one of disdain. As the evening progressed, students showcased various projects, from interactive timelines to powerful reenactments of pivotal moments in history. Each presentation was met with varying degrees of enthusiasm, but Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that some parents were still unconvinced. Finally, it was time for Marcus to address the audience again. He stepped up to the podium, taking a deep breath. "I want to take a moment to acknowledge how far these students have come. Many of them struggled at the beginning of the year, but they persevered. They have proven that with encouragement and the right resources, they can achieve greatness." A voice interrupted from the back. It was Mr. Stevens, his tone dripping with condescension. "But isn't it just luck that they've done well? I mean, they're still just kids. How can we trust that this will last?" The room fell silent, and Marcus felt a rush of anger. He had anticipated pushback, but hearing it articulated so bluntly ignited a fire within him. "Luck," he echoed, allowing the weight of the word to hang in the air. "What you're seeing tonight is not luck. It's the result of hard work, dedication, and belief. These students have poured their souls into these projects, and they deserve recognition for their efforts." Another parent, Mrs. Lopez, chimed in, "I think our kids have done amazing work. They've shown us a side of history we often overlook." Marcus seized the moment. Exactly. History is full of stories that teach us about resilience, hope, and the importance of believing in one another, just like these students have believed in themselves. He looked directly at Mrs. Stevens and Mr. Stevens, his gaze unwavering. "We cannot diminish their achievements by attributing them to mere luck. They've worked hard to be here tonight." The atmosphere shifted slightly. Some parents nodded in agreement while others still seemed resistant. Marcus felt the weight of the moment. "I understand that change is difficult, but I urge you to reflect on your own beliefs about education and the potential of our children. They are capable of greatness if we choose to believe in them." As he concluded, a wave of applause erupted, though it was mixed with murmurs of dissent. Marcus felt a sense of hope, but he knew that the battle against prejudice and skepticism was far from over. Yet he had planted a seed, and perhaps, just perhaps, it would begin to grow in the minds of those who had doubted him and his students. The evening wrapped up, with students mingling with their families, but Marcus could still sense the lingering tension. He had taken a step forward, but the path ahead remained fraught with challenges. As he watched his students celebrate their accomplishments, he reminded himself that change takes time, and he was determined to continue fighting for their future, no matter the obstacles. In the dimly lit conference room of Oakwood High School, a palpable tension hung in the air as Marcus Thompson stood before the school board. The members, a mix of skeptical and supportive faces, had gathered to discuss the recent improvements in his classroom. As they sifted through reports showcasing the rising test scores and increased student participation, Marcus felt a flicker of hope. His hard work was finally being acknowledged. "Mr. Thompson," began Dr. Hargrove, the stern-faced principal of Oakwood High, "your students have shown remarkable progress this semester. We believe it's time to allocate more resources to your program. We want to support your initiatives." Marcus's heart raced. This was the validation he had yearned for since his arrival at the school. "Thank you, Dr. Hargrove," he replied, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions. "I'm committed to ensuring that my students not only succeed academically, but also grow as individuals. With additional resources, I believe we can achieve even greater things." As murmurs of agreement rippled through the board, Marcus allowed himself a brief smile, envisioning a classroom filled with more materials, technology, and opportunities for his students. However, just as the meeting seemed to be taking a favorable turn, a new board member, Mrs. Carson, interjected. "But what about the concerns from certain parents regarding your qualifications?" she asked, her tone cool and analytical. "We can't ignore the doubts within the community." Marcus's smile faltered. He had hoped that the progress would silence the critics, but the shadows of prejudice still loomed large. "I understand the concerns," he began, his voice firm. "But I assure you, my dedication and passion for teaching are evident in my students' work. They are thriving, and I believe that should be our focus." The board members exchanged glances, some nodding in agreement while others appeared unconvinced. The conversation shifted, but Marcus could feel the weight of the lingering skepticism pressing down on him. Later that week, as he walked down the sun-drenched streets of Oakwood, Marcus encountered a familiar sight: the town's local newspaper stand. A headline caught his eye, and his stomach twisted in knots. "Controversial teacher. Are his qualifications enough?" The article questioned his credentials once again, reigniting the doubts that he had worked so hard to dispel. Frustration welled up inside him. He had poured his heart into his students and had fought tooth and nail for their success. Now, it felt as though the ground he had gained was slipping away. Determined to confront the issue head-on, Marcus organized a community meeting, inviting parents and residents to gather in the school auditorium. He wanted to share his story and the challenges he faced, to show them the truth behind the headlines. As the evening approached, the auditorium filled with a mix of familiar faces, some hopeful, others skeptical. Marcus stood at the front, heart pounding as he surveyed the crowd. He took a deep breath and began, "Thank you all for coming tonight. I know there are concerns about my qualifications, but I want to share with you not just my background, but also the journey of my students." He spoke passionately about the obstacles he had overcome, the systemic issues within the education system, and the personal struggles he had faced as a Black teacher. "I am here because I believe in the potential of every student, regardless of their background. My goal is to inspire them, to show them that they are capable of achieving greatness." As he shared anecdotes of his students' triumphs, like when they presented their history projects with pride and confidence, the atmosphere in the room began to shift. Some parents nodded in understanding, their expressions softening as they listened. "I've faced prejudice, not just from within the school, but from the community at large," Marcus continued, his voice unwavering. "But I refuse to let that define me or my students. They deserve more than the doubt that has been cast upon them." A woman in the back, Mrs. Jenkins, raised her hand. "I didn't realize how much you've had to fight for these kids. I'm sorry if I ever doubted you." Encouraged by her words, others began to speak up, acknowledging their own biases and misconceptions. Marcus felt a surge of hope as more parents shared their thoughts, expressing their newfound respect for his efforts and the progress of his students. As the meeting drew to a close, Marcus looked out at the audience, seeing faces filled with understanding and empathy. For the first time, he felt that he was not alone in this battle. The respect he had long sought was beginning to blossom, a testament to the power of honest dialogue and the strength of community. As the community meeting unfolded, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Marcus Thompson stood at the front of the room, his heart racing as he faced an assembly of skeptical parents and concerned community members. He had prepared for this moment, hoping to reinforce the progress his students had made and to address the lingering doubts about his qualifications. The soft hum of murmurs filled the air, punctuated by the occasional cough. As Marcus began to speak, his voice steady despite the weight of scrutiny pressing down on him. "Thank you all for coming tonight," he began, scanning the faces in the crowd. "I appreciate your willingness to engage in this conversation. Our students have shown incredible growth, not just academically, but as individuals. They've learned to express their voices, to collaborate, and to believe in themselves." He paused, taking a breath to steady his nerves. "But for that growth to continue, we need to work together, parents, teachers, and the community." A ripple of applause broke out, but it was short-lived. From the back of the room, a figure rose, his face flushed with indignation. Mr. Stevens, a father known for his outspoken views, interrupted Marcus, his voice cutting through the applause like a knife. "You think you can come in here and just turn these kids around? I saw those projects, and quite frankly, they were mediocre at best. You're just a distraction." Gasps echoed through the crowd, and Marcus felt his pulse quicken. He clenched his fists at his sides, but remained composed. "Mr. Stevens, I understand you have concerns, but these students have worked hard. They've poured their hearts into their projects, and it shows. They deserve our support, not dismissal." "Support? You think they're getting support from you?" Stevens spat, his tone dripping with disdain. "I know you've been struggling to keep them engaged, and I was the one who sent those letters. I thought someone needed to wake you up to reality." A collective murmur of shock spread through the room. Marcus's heart sank, but he held his ground, determined not to let Stevens's admission derail his efforts. "You sent those letters?" he echoed, his voice rising slightly. "What message does that send to our children? That prejudice and hatred are acceptable because of a difference in opinion." The tension escalated as other parents began to shift uncomfortably in their seats. One mother, Mrs. Collins, spoke up, her voice quivering with anger. "How can you stand there and admit to that? You're showing our children that it's okay to hate on someone just because they're different or because you don't understand their methods. It's not right." "Yes," shouted another parent, a father who had been quietly observing until now. "We should be fostering an environment of support, not tearing each other down. Marcus is trying to help our kids, and we should be grateful for his dedication." The room buzzed with energy as more parents began to voice their agreement, turning their ire towards Stevens. The tide was shifting, and Marcus felt a surge of hope as he looked out at the faces of the community, many of whom had come to realize their own biases in the heat of the moment. Stevens, cornered and defensive, sputtered, "I was just trying to protect my kid. You don't understand the pressures we face." "That's exactly the problem," Marcus interjected, his voice calm yet firm. "We need to understand each other, to listen, and to work together if we want our children to thrive. It's not about proving who's right or wrong. It's about creating a supportive environment for every student." As the meeting continued, the atmosphere transformed from one of hostility to one of unity. Parents began to rally around Marcus, sharing their own experiences of overcoming prejudice, and many started to express their gratitude for his unwavering commitment to their children. By the end of the night, Mr. Stevens was left isolated, confronted by the very community he had tried to divide. As the meeting adjourned, Marcus felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He had faced the storm and emerged not only unscathed but stronger. Weeks later, Marcus was honored at a school event, receiving an award for excellence in teaching. The students cheered, their smiles bright as they celebrated their mentor. Standing proud, Marcus realized that their journey was just beginning. In that small town, he had become a beacon of hope and change, proving that perseverance could indeed overcome the deepest prejudices.